When Black Beauty by Anna Sewell was first published, it had the subtitle, The Autobiography of a Horse. To that, I would add just one word, Victorian. The autobiography of a Victorian horse. In this video, I will review Black Beauty using my version of the 5P system that was originally created by my friend Book Gabber on BookTok. I will give it a score based on the 5 categories of purpose, plot, etc., prose, personal, and position. And at the end, I will get the average of all 5 scores and give it its final rating. But if there's a final rating, there's an initial rating. I like to give books a vibes rating. Okay, so entirely on vibes, Black Beauty gets 2.5 out of 5. Let's start with purpose. Why was this book written? Anna Sewell was pretty clear about her objective, which was to induce kindness, sympathy, and an understanding treatment of horses. And with that as her goal, it was pretty genius of her to write this story from the horse's perspective, because it was key to how successful this novel eventually became. It was a bestseller for years after its publication, not just because people genuinely appreciated it, but also because animal welfare groups were passing out copies of this like pamphlets. And it absolutely did lead to more kindness, sympathy, and understanding treatment of horses, which I think is a really great legacy for anyone. But while I'm very happy for Anna Sewell, and while I also personally support the message of kindness to animals, I have to admit I dislike books that have a really obvious agenda. So for being a tool of social engineering, I give Black Beauty 1 out of 5. By the way, I do say a bit more on Black Beauty's influence on animal welfare media and the animal rescue story specifically in a short video essay I published earlier in this week. So if you're interested in that, please check it out in my playlist for video essays. Now for plot, etc. How does Black Beauty do when I evaluate its literary elements? Firstly, when it comes to plot, this is a very episodic story. When I was a few chapters in, I compared it to a diary novel. When I had finished, I realized it was more like a TV drama, but one in which all the episodes are just half an hour long. And this drama has 4 seasons, corresponding to the 4 parts of the novel or the 4 eras in Black Beauty's life, and each chapter is like a half-hour episode. And while I'm comparing it to a TV series, I will say, yes, the finale is worth it. But despite the disjointed seasons of Black Beauty's life, there is an overarching theme that holds everything together, and it comes from the advice that Black Beauty receives from his mother at the end of chapter 3. She says to him, "There are a great many kinds of men. I hope you will fall into good hands, but a horse never knows who may buy him or who may drive him. It is all a chance for us, but still I say, do your best wherever it is and keep up your good name." And this idea that a horse's life is a series of spins on the wheel of fortune overshadows every chapter. When he is in good circumstances, they seem fragile. Fortunately, when he is in bad circumstances, we have the hope that he will be pulled out of them. His mother's advice, this little speech, really sets the emotional tone of the novel and holds everything together. As a protagonist, Black Beauty is adorable. He's very endearing and sweet. It's easy to fall in love with him. We're always rooting for him, even if we're just rooting for him to get lucky. He has no agency in his own life, so we can't really root for him to make good decisions that will affect his future. The characters who do have agency are the people, and unfortunately, they're mostly flat. The only thing we really need to know about them is, are they kind to animals or are they cruel to animals? Which, in fairness, is what a domesticated animal would want to know about people. There are no deep character studies here, although the character of Jerry, the cab driver who is a recovering alcoholic who is handling his sobriety very well, could be an exception. And yes, Black Beauty is also a temperance novel. Finally, the setting, it's very bare bones and all the stables just blend into each other, even though Black Beauty mentions when some of them are cleaner or better for his feet than others. Anna Sewell may want to inspire social change in her novels, but she's no Charles Dickens. I did like the descriptions of the congested streets of London that the cab drivers and the horses had to deal with, but that's about it. So for literary elements, I give Black Beauty 2 out of 5. The third category is prose. How do I find Sewell's use of language? Well, if I had to describe her writing style in 3 words, they would be quaint, sentimental, and preachy. So the quaintness and the sentimentality aren't too bad. This has the vibe of sitting in a warm kitchen, at the table, sipping tea with an older middle-aged person who has a lot of life stories, a lot of interesting things to say, and whose opinions are very much grounded on how things were done in the past. I also didn't mind the preachiness too much because I'm part of the proverbial choir. As I said, I already agree with Sewell's message that we need to be kinder and more humane in our treatment of animals. But she does lay it on kind of thick, especially when she's also ranting about the evils of alcohol. The connection to the temperance movement probably tipped you off that there are very strong Christian elements in this. Sewell was an evangelical Christian, and the parts when the characters are glossing on what they read in the Bible or how they interpreted the Bible or just saying something that came out of a lifetime of Bible reading are actually some really nice passages. They might rub some people the wrong way. They have the, again, the quaintness and the sentimentality of, I guess, a Bible verse cross-stitched on a sampler and hung in a kitchen, the same vibesy kitchen I mentioned earlier. But what I appreciated about them is that they also grounded the novel in its time setting so much more than her descriptions or anything else in the story actually did. They sounded just like what a religious Victorian evangelical would say. And some of them are pretty good and would probably be worthy of being cross-stitched on something. Though now I'm going to give an example that I don't think anyone would want to cross-stitch because one of my favorite lines is, "Cruelty is the devil's own trademark." There isn't anything really special about the prose, but I do like that Black Beauty's voice is very gentle. For him, I will add an extra half point. And so prose gets 2 out of 5. And now I get personal. Reading Black Beauty was, on the whole, a positive experience for me. This was a reread of a book I had only read once in childhood. There were some things I remembered, but most of it I did not, and I feel I appreciated it better as an adult. What I liked about it was that I really fell in love with Black Beauty as a character, and I was thrilled that he got his happy ending. Complex books are nice, but sometimes we just want something simple where someone we love gets what he deserves. But it also started to bother me when I noticed how emotionally manipulative Anna Sewell was. It's along the lines of talking about pet owners and referring to them as the dog's dad or the cat's mom. And I know that's something we do these days because we genuinely care for our pets. But there is a level of emotional manipulation there. And I also do think it's possible to be kind and caring and responsible towards our pets and not think of them as on the same level as human children. But saying so kind of makes me feel like the bad guy. And I also did feel like the bad guy because reading Black Beauty reminded me of one time in my past when I was visiting Intramuros in Manila, which is the old city built during Spanish colonial times and preserved until now, where you can see old buildings and also ride calesas, which are two-wheeled horse-drawn carriages, which were what people used for transportation in colonial days. So I and my companions at the time hired a calesa to take us for a spin around the area. And it soon became apparent that the horse pulling the calesa was not living his best life. I still feel so bad about that. And reading about mistreated horses in London 150 years ago just made it worse. The experience of that Kalesa ride actually already convinced me that the horses in Manila need more humane and understanding treatment. I didn't need Anna Sewell to make me feel worse. And that's why, just as I will never ride a Kalesa in Intramuros again, I will also very likely never reread Black Beauty again. And if I were reading this in isolation, it would get a much lower rating. But because I'm reading this as part of my Year of the Horse reading challenge, in which I read 12 books in which horses figure significantly either as characters or as part of the plot or as symbols, I actually think this was the best book with which to start the challenge. It means that I will be looking at the other books and the portrayal of horses in the other books with a more critical eye. So for that, I think I can give a higher personal rating of 3 out of 5. Finally, let's look at position, which is the place that Black Beauty has in the literary canon and in the general culture. And it seems to be a pretty decent place for what the book is. It's been in print for 150 years and it's considered a beloved children's classic. It's the first book that came to mind for so many people when I told them I was doing the Year of the Horse Challenge and asked for horse books that they could recommend. And that is actually pretty impressive for a book that arguably does not have much literary merit. It also pioneered the genre of sympathetic anthropomorphic animal protagonist. So if you like these books, then say thank you to Anna Sewell. She is their grandmother. We also cannot understate how influential Black Beauty was in obtaining better working conditions for horses and maybe other working animals in general. I think all animal lovers can be happy about this. And if a mediocre book succeeded where better written books did not, then I can give it its flowers. 2.5 flowers out of 5, to be specific. When we add up all those scores and get the average, the 5P rating for Black Beauty is 2.1 out of 5, which is significantly lower than the Vibes rating, but not as bad as it could have been. One of the best parts of having a BookTube channel and sharing my reading with others is also having them share their reading with me. So if you have something to say about Black Beauty, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, or even something to say about the scores, I'd be happy to read your comment.